Hey, greetings everyone. Just a little bit of an announcement here for you. I really feel that this issue with what's going to be coming up with the economy and what Lindsey Williams is saying is very important. Not saying he's the final authority on it, but I think he probably has some good input to add with the other things that you learn by reading the news and other websites and listening to people and whatever the case may be. I took some time, went ahead and made a written transcript of his most recent presentation on 4th of December on the GoldSeek Radio show, which is apparently the only public speaking he's done since he made that pronouncement that got me all fired up 2 weeks ago, that caused me to make those two videos. And you can find this online. I'll go ahead and post a link to it here. It's on Script, which is a pretty popular site for posting documents. We'll just put it out there, public domain. And I actually took and broke it into sections, trying to just organize it a little bit better, so as you read this it's a little bit easier to follow. I just really think it's important to put this into the written form. I think it's just so much more powerful than just watching a video. It also allows you to study it. It makes it searchable, and you can mark it up and enter into a conversation with other like-minded people. CW just indicates that this is going to be the host, Chris, talking, and then LW, of course, is Lindsey Williams. At first he gives a little bit of background on who he is, makes it pretty short this time. Then he defines what the financial collapse is. And here you can see I'm actually putting the time code markers in there on the video. So you can actually, if you want to hear him say this as you read it, you can just go to this time position code on that GoldSeek video. Then he talks about what the Affordable Care Act really does. But really, actually, all he does here, he just says it's not what it's made out to be. He doesn't really say what the implications are and how it ties into what quote-unquote elite are planning here. So that's sort of a bit of a shortcoming. It'd be nice if there was a little bit more clarification on that. Then he talks a little bit about what the definition of a total collapse is, at least in the eyes of the quote-unquote elite again. And then he gives a little bit of history on what parts of what I call the end game, get that from Alex Jones, have already happened up until this point, just to give you a little bit of background. And then he talks about confiscation of pension and retirement funds here in the U.S., points that it's already happened very recently in other countries, like Poland, for example. And then he talks about the currency devaluation. Then he talks about how that leads to the U.S. dollar losing its world reserve currency status. Gives a little plug for the website. Then the big issue in this whole video is really this global currency reset, where supposedly the IMF is going to lead an initiative to tie all the currencies of the world together, based on the assets of the country. The assets probably being the natural resources, oil and lumber and that sort of thing, so there's not as much fluctuation in the future. Probably also allows the central group to control what a country's currency is valued at, because they're the ones that make the definition, and therefore if a certain country doesn't fall in line, they can devalue their currency, in my opinion. He doesn't say that. Then he talks a little bit more about how the national currency is going to be reset according to each nation's assets. I just touched on that briefly. And he's talking about how the rich are preparing to profit from all this. Big surprise there, right? Doesn't give us very many details here, so I guess we're not allowed to join in the party. Not sure if he really knows what you would have to do, but he claims he doesn't, or he says he can't say anything. And he goes into a little more detail about why the U.S. dollar will no longer be the reserve currency, and how this reset's going to make your dollars worth less. They're not going to take the money out of your bank account. It just basically amounts to inflation. So after this happens, 30 to 60 days, you can see the prices of things on the store shelves start going up. And you'll see it a lot sooner in gasoline, according to Lindsey. Then he goes into this here, which is a little bit controversial in my mind, how electric smart meters are designed to mess up your head. There's a lot of controversy right now about the radiation from these things, disrupting the human body and the mind. That's legitimate, but he says, according to his friend here, that was actually a conspiracy to dumb everybody down and make them accept this global currency collapse and implementation of the New World Order. He kind of crosses the line there. I don't know if that's legitimate. Sort of tramples on the rest of what he's saying here. Makes him look a little bit foolish, but who knows? Maybe it's true. And then basically a little summary here. He says, quoting this Salinas guy, this Mexican billionaire, that gold's the place to be. Then he goes into his standard sales pitch for his DVD, and I sort of stopped the transcription right at that point. Anyway, there it is. Everything has a line number. Every single line has a unique line number. So if you're talking to somebody, you want to reference what he says, it's very easy to do. And here on Script, if you want to download this to your computer in a PDF format, there's the download button right there to do it with. Okay, now just a few comments on his presentation. I'd hoped to do a complete analysis, but I'm rather short on time right now, so just a couple of thoughts for you to ponder. Hopefully you'll also find these interesting. Probably the thing that bothers me the most, I remember back on 21 November, he made this post, the one that got me all stirred up. He's quoting his buddy here that he gets his source, that this thing is going to cause starvation, riots, and possibly even martial law. Well, let's go see what he says about that in his presentation. Okay, now I'm just looking at a PDF version of that transcript I just showed you that I got offline. Well, I put it online. And as I noted, he said this whole thing was going to cause riots and the world's going to be a big mess, but he actually says the exact opposite during his presentation. Like, in the first example here, he says, we didn't see any riots, and we probably aren't going to see any anytime soon. Then further on down, he says there will be no riots. There will be no people running in the streets. And finally, he says, you see, they don't want to see riots, or they don't want riots. So anyway, it's very contradictory to the rather exciting post he made on his website a few weeks ago. So I'm a little bit curious about why that is. The other big thing that really makes me curious is Lindsey Williams' whole history on this thing is the alleged massive oil reserves that are up in Alaska and Prudhoe Bay. I mean, after all, these sources he's been dealing with were the oil men he met when he was a chaplain on that pipeline construction project. And in most of his spiels over the past couple of years has always been about the oil in Prudhoe Bay. If you remember, it's a big hush-hush, secret. It doesn't exist officially right now. And they're trying to get the price of oil up over, I forget what it was, $200 a barrel. At which point they would roll this out and save the world. You know, in the meantime, leading up to that, they were supposed to take down the Middle East and pretty much destroy all those countries over there and destroy their oil industry. And as you know, they got sort of stopped at Syria. In any regard, there's no mention whatsoever of this oil in Prudhoe Bay and what the plans are and the tie-in and what their plans are now that this thing in Syria has been thwarted. So I'm very curious there. Now, of course, he does say there's some things supposedly he's not allowed to tell us, and I might think that perhaps that's one of them. But apparently he has a DVD out. I don't know. Maybe he tells more. Typically I've found he doesn't really say a whole lot more, but it's up to you if you want to buy it. And I guess this probably will be on YouTube soon, if it isn't already. Okay, I'd like to address one last thing before I jump off. And that is this information from Lindsey Williams actually credible? Should we even consider it? And a couple bullet points on that. First of all, perhaps Lindsey misinterpreted what he was being told. After all, this guy is supposedly an executive of a major oil corporation, so there could be a difference in language there. And it's not intentional on his part, but it's just not being repeated to us the way it was told to him. Something else to consider is perhaps his source is wrong. He's just a man too. It may just be his opinion. I mean, I don't know if what Lindsey is saying here is a matter of this man's opinion, or this is actually a legitimate conspiracy where they sit around the good old boys club and plan these things out and have meeting minutes, and he's conveying what their actual plans are. The thing to consider is perhaps his source is manipulating him. You know, commonly if someone's going to manipulate, say, the press to persuade the public of something, they have to come across as credible, so 90% of what they say may be truth and the other 10% may be fiction. Something to think about. Also, perhaps maybe the information that he's not allowed to tell us, or that he's saying he's not allowed to tell us, Were we to know it, would alter our perception of what he's already said so far, that missing piece of the puzzle. And then finally, if this is indeed a plan on quote-unquote the elite's part, just because it's a plan doesn't mean it's going to necessarily work out that way. So if indeed Syria was a plan to invade that country, which is pretty obvious it was, as you can see, it didn't quite work out according to their plans. All right, just something to consider. I hope you find the transcript useful. And if I have some more time, I'll do a more thorough analysis. Cheers. Have a good one.